Hello everyone. I hope you are having a good day. If not, you can still turn it into a great day. In today's video, we are going to create this microworld theme, Last of Us. This is a step-by-step tutorial, so stay with me till the end of this video. Unfortunately, my screen recorder does not record right clicks or other windows. Sorry for the inconvenience, but you can still follow the tutorial. You can find the material used in this tutorial from Google, Pexels, or Pixabay. Let's start. First, we will create this 3D base. Let's open up Photoshop and let's start. Create a new document in Photoshop. Make sure its width and length are same. Here I take 2000 pixels by 2000 pixels. I will show you a trick to make this 3D base. To do that, visit my Instagram profile, link is in the description. Take a screenshot of my latest post of Microworlds. For example, this one, the dead desert, at the end you will find its link. Next, paste this screenshot in Photoshop. Now press Ctrl+T to transform the image. Now try to align the image border with the edge of the document. The border of the dead desert and not the full image. Like this. Next, select Polygon Lasso tool from toolbar, or press L on keyboard. Now trace the left side of the dead desert. Like this, and create a solid color layer. Choose any color you like, and click OK. Next, trace the right side of the dead desert and create another solid color layer. Choose any other color and click OK. Now, trace the top of the image like this. And create a third solid color layer and click OK. Delete or hide the screenshot image, and name the layers as left side, right side and the top side. Next, if there are any gaps between the layers, just select that particular layer, and click on its layer mask, and transform it by pressing Ctrl+T on keyboard. Here I select right side and transform it, then right click and select warp and try to fix the gaps. After that, I selected the top layer, and performed the same task again, and here is the result. Next, let's group these three layers together. Next, find any grunge image from Google, Pexels of Pixabay, link in description, and transform the image. Right-click and select Distort and make it smaller, then right-click and select Perspective. Click bottom right corner and drag. Add a black mask to it, by pressing Alt and clicking the Add Mask icon from the Layers panel. Next, select Brush tool, with hardness 0, and opacity 20%, and start painting with white on the mask and not on the layer. It will reveal only some of the layer, and make it look like a floor. Next, add a solid color layer of any color behind the 3D base. The color will depend on the theme you choose for your microworld, and start painting with black with 100% opacity and 0 hardness brush. Adjust the opacity to reveal and hide particular parts of your image. Now, let's add a shadow by adding a black solid color layer, and bring it on top of the floor layer. Now create a selection as shown and start painting with white on its layer mask. Now adjust the opacity of the brush and reveal and hide some of the part of the shadows. The direction of the shadow depends on the position of the light source. Now let's start creating the microworld. I will use this 3D base that I have already created. Let's first import this image by click and drag. It will automatically have transform rectangle on, then right click and select Distort. Now place the image on top of the 3D structure and match it perfectly. Make it a little bigger, to make sure it covers the whole top area. Now, create a selection of top area, by pressing Ctrl and clicking on the mask of the top side of the 3D base. Next, click on the Add Mask option from the Layers panel and add a layer mask to this image. Next, I imported this mossy texture, and transformed it by selecting Distort option from right-click options. After placing it on top, I created a black layer mask to it, by pressing Alt then clicking on the Add Mask option from the Layers panel. Next, I made a selection around the top layer and started to reveal some areas of the mossy texture. Tip: to reveal the image you need to use brush tool and paint with white on the mask, and to hide the image, you need to paint with the black. I sometimes lowered the opacity to 20% and sometimes increased the opacity to 100%. I also increased and decreased the hardness of the brush. Tip: press top number keys on the keyboard while brush tool selected to set the opacity of the brush. For example, press 2 to set the opacity to 20%, press 5 to set it to 50%, or press 0 to set opacity to 100%. Next, I imported this image and placed it on top of everything. Then applied a black mask to it and hid it. Next, I created the selection around the top surface and started to reveal some parts of the image, using the same technique described before. After some time, I was happy with this result. And then imported this building and placed it on top. Then created an exposure layer from the Layers panel by clicking on Adjustment Layers. Then I clipped this exposure layer with the building layer by clicking on this arrow or pressing and holding Alt, then taking the cursor in between the exposure layer and the building layer, then pressing left click. I increased the exposure and inverted the mask by clicking Ctrl+I. Then I started revealing the highlight on the building. It took some time, but I think it was worth it. Here is before and after. Next, the highlights will be incomplete without shadows, so I again created an exposure adjustment layer from the Layers panel and clipped it with the building layer. Decreased the exposure and offset. Then again inverted the mask by pressing Ctrl+I and started to reveal the layer on particular parts of the building. After some time, here is the result, before and after. Then I added a layer mask to the building and started painting with black at the bottom of the building, to give it a feel like grass has grown around it. You can use any brush you like, from special brush collection. Tip: just right-click using brush tool and you will find these brush collections. Next, I imported this mossy texture and placed it under the shadow and highlight layers and clipped it to the building layer. Next, I created a black mask on it by pressing Alt and clicking on the Add Layer Mask option. Then with the same technique I started revealing and hiding some parts of this mossy texture. After I was done, here is the result. Next, I added a solid black color adjustment layer, inverted the mask and then created the shadow around the building. Now was the time to add some bushes. I imported this image, selected the image by just selecting Quick Selection tool, and pressing Select Subject option on top, then I used to select and mask option to refine the edges, then press OK. Next I made the layer a smart object and placed it under at the bottom of the building, then adjusted it a bit, and here we go. Next added this image to the building, distorted it a bit and then used layer mask to hide some parts. And here is the result. Then I created group of these layers and named it building. Next, I imported some more bushes and tried to create a dense bushes-like structure. First I selected the bush by using Select Subject, then used Refine Edge tool from the Select and Mask option, and created a new layer from it. Then deleted the original image. Next, I placed the image here on the edge of the top surface and started duplicating the image, one on top of other. Next, I thought to bring some variations in it and imported this image or removed its background. Next, I tried to create some variation by placing this bush between others, and arranged the layers in order. Next, I created layer masks on all these layers and revealed only what I needed. And here is the result. I grouped all these layers together, Then I added a hue and saturation layer and colorized them. Next I added shadows by adding an exposure layer by inverting the mask and revealed only necessary parts, then did same with the highlights. I spent some time and here is the result. You can name each layer and group them as you need. Next, I added this tree, selected it, then refined its edge and placed it on this corner. Then using same technique I added highlights and shadows. Then this tree needed some drop shadow, which I added by creating a blank layer below this tree layer, then started painting with black and created some rough shadow, then added layer mask to this shadow layer and fixed it a bit. Next, I started adding some more details here and there, made some highlights and shadows, and here is the result. Now I added a car, to add some more details. Then it took a lot of time to add details to this car. I used all the techniques that I described earlier. First, I added this mossy texture and added a layer mask to it, then tried to fix it on the car. I created shadows and highlights with exposure layers and kept adding more and more details. I added a shadow below the car by just adding a layer below it and painted it with black, then added layer mask and fixed it. Next I found this image on Google. I used it to add a tiny detail to make it look like someone was zombified inside the car, then added shadows to it to make it look it is inside the car. It can hardly be seen from zoom out view, but still a little bit of detail. Next added the fungus on the whole car. How, you may ask? Well, by the same old technique, adding a layer mask and unhiding some parts. I kept adding more and more details till it started looking more and more horrible. Then I stopped and added more shadows and highlights. Here is the result. Let me know in comments how it looks. I tried to keep my layers panel mess free by grouping the layers together. Next idea was to put some zombies in the scene. And I found some on Google. I selected the subject and cut it out from its background, then tried to find a nice location for it. Then I suddenly realized to make the top surface darker, and to give it some kind of evening look. Next it was time to add highlights and shadows to our main boss zombie. So let's create an exposure layer and increase the exposure, then invert the mask and start painting with white brush. I used brush with opacity between 20 to 100%, and hardness with 0 and sometimes with 100%. Then I added another exposure layer and added shadows to the boss zombie. Here is before and after. Then I added a drop shadow to the boss zombie. Then I added 2 more zombies and a ton of adjustments, shadows, and highlights. I made the lavenders smaller and adjusted some other stuff. And here we go. I grouped all the layers together and called it top objects. If you are enjoying the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now is time to add sides. I used this image. Now transform it and right click and select distort. Now adjust the image with the side of this 3D base. Duplicate the layer and distort it to adjust it with the right side. Next add a layer on top of the left layer and start adding shadows, and add a layer on top of the right side and add some subtle shadows. Next, I added this mossy image again and adjusted it with the both sides, then revealed only the top portion of the image and hid the rest by using a layer mask. After I was done, here is the result. Then I gave a little bit of more details to the side by adding shadows to the small patches. Next, I added this image and distorted it and added a layer mask to it. Then revealed some of the image to give it a look of some fungus. I added hue and saturation layer to it and colorized it. On the right side I added this image again, and then distorted it and adjusted it with the right side. Added a black layer mask and started revealing some part of the image. After that I gave both sides some more detail by adding shadows and highlights. For highlights and shadows I added exposure layer on top the shadow layer, then started painting with white, having opacity 100% and hardness also 100%. I changed the blending mode to overlay. After that I added shadows in the same way. Here is the result on both sides. Before and after. Now I grouped all the layers together and then duplicated it. Next, I made a smart object from the duplicated group. Then I added a camera raw filter. But unfortunately, my screen recorder did not record that part. I played with the setting and here is the final result. Then I thought the shadow needed to be fixed and I added a slight highlight around the edges. And here we go, the final result. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and leave a comment, and if you like this type of content then subscribe and hit the bell icon. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video. Till then check out these other entertaining videos.